Tonight we are going to be in Genesis. This parsha is called Lech Lecha, and it is found in Genesis, Bereshit, the 13th chapter. We're going to be talking about the test. Why are we tested? What is the point of the test?
To refine us.
What's the purpose? Yes. And we're going to talk about its purpose. We're going to examine Abraham's test and how we are tested. One of the first things that we learn in life is this: nothing that is any good can come from something that is not tested. Everything, everybody in life has to be tested. If you buy a car, you want to hope that they had a test inspection on it. If you buy a piece of furniture, you want to know that it passed the proper inspections. If you hire somebody for a job, you want to know that that person has the proper credentials and they have been tested in the job and can do it. Well, Hashem, in his great wisdom, chooses Tzaddikim, the righteous in the nations. He chooses the Tzaddik, the righteous one, this way. He provides them with an avenue of test. So, by the end of this lecture, hopefully, we will have embraced the idea of test. We will have embraced the idea that every moment that we live should be a moment for us to prove ourselves to Hashem. Knowing that this week, that I was going to touch on this class and lecture this today, I had my test this week. You know, sometimes you expect tests to be like, cherubim sits down and tells you to do something great. It's usually not that, right? My test was I bought a desk. And I won't say the name of the company. I don't want to disparage them. They were very kind and was very helpful. It's just one of those things that happens. But I get there, and the first thing I do is I'm standing there with Loretta's grandson, and he's going to help load it and bring it over when I buy it. Well, first I couldn't find the credit card. Found the credit card. Then I presented it at the counter, and the credit card was invalid. Didn't know why. Called the bank, and they said, there was credit fraud on it from Home Depot or something, from that big credit scandal, and they just shut it down and issued me another. I was glad they told me 2 days after it happened, but I go back, I pay for the thing with the checkbook, and I pick up the desk, and I bring it here. I finally have to get my help of someone else. I think your grandson actually brings it. And he brings the desk, and I wait a whole patient day because we have so much to do around the office, and I open the box, and it has a big crack in the desk.
Oh.
Right? So I said, not a problem. Not a problem.
Is that what you said?
No, I did.
The first time, yes.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah. Not a problem. I'll just go get that exchange. I'm just not sure how I'm going to do it. So I ended up talking to the people, and they said, look, what we'll do is you just bring it back and exchange it for another one. Not a problem. So I don't have a truck, so I'm having to get somebody to bring it back and forth. And I get there, I take it off, and I said, look, before you give me the next one, open it up and make sure there's no cracks or anything. Not a problem. And the lady there says, you're so kind, you're so sweet, you're not... I said, look, my life's too short to be upset or irritated. Just give me a new table, right? I get it back here, and I go to build it yesterday, and the legs are not in the box. Now, that pushed me a little bit more, but I'm thinking, you know what? There's no need to get mad or upset. Things happen, right? So I go back up there, and I'm smiling, and I'm saying, is this like an inside joke? Is there a camera? But there are no legs in the desk. She said, I'm so embarrassed. You've been up here already 3 times. This is horrible. We'll make sure you take care of it. We'll give you the legs off the display model. I said, that's great. That's nice. So I wait all day, and she says, I'll call you about noon. And I'm patient, right, Moshe? We worked around here all day trying to get the place cleaned up. And finally, about 2:30, I call, and I said, I'm checking to see if you got my legs available for my desk. And the guy says, Like, you're serious? You want us to take it off the show model? Like, yes, I'm very serious. I want it off the show model. I was like, oh, okay, we'll take it off. We thought you wanted us to order you one. And I said, well, if you order it, can you reassure I get it? Well, not really, because we're not even sure we can find it in stock anywhere. I said, well, yes, take the legs off. So the whole point is this, is your tests come in different ways, right? And Baruch Hashem, I was able to pass it and not say any illicit words.
It's still not the end of the story.
What's the end of the story? Oh
That
yeah, that's not even the end of the story. So today I come in and last night I was going to put the desk together. And I realized something's not right, so I need to call professionally. And so I called Moshe. And Moshe shows up this morning with his drill, his hard hat, and his glasses, the whole nine yards. And he's ready to tackle it. And he sets the legs out, and it's not the legs for the desk. So I was like, what am I going to do? He says, well, we can take it back. And I'm like, I am not taking this. I've hauled this thing all over Humble. I'm not taking it back. And so he says, well, we'll just make it fit. And I knew that if anybody could make it fit, it would be Moshe. And he made it fit. We drilled it out and made it work. And I didn't lose my cool, except when I walked out of the room, Moshe came out and said, you're not going to believe what just happened. And I almost lost my mind from that door to this door over here thinking, what happened now? And all I heard was there's a big hole, right? And he was picking on me. So you test. He drilled a hole for me somewhere else. But anyway, so the point is tests are an important part of our life. The sages say, Maimonides says that there are 10 tests. There's actually a debate between the rabbis what the exact tests are. But it's really immaterial what the tests are. We'll enumerate some of these. We talked about 3 of them yesterday. The fire, the idol worship issue, being thrown in the fire. That is from the Midrashic sources, not from the Torah sources, the written Torah. And there is the separation, the calling out, leaving the land. Those are some of the sources. But Maimonides' list of 10 items, and I'll go through them fairly quickly, and we'll hit some of the text here, is listed in it's listed in Genesis. First would be God tells him to leave the homeland, to be a stranger in Canaan. Next is immediately after his arrival in the Promised Land, he encounters famine, so he goes to Egypt. We covered that yesterday, the whole deal where he says Sarai is his wife, is his sister. The Egyptians captured his wife and bring Sarah to Pharaoh. Number 4 would be Abraham faces incredible odds in the battle of the 4 kings, in which Lot was caught up in the whole deal. He marries Hagar after not being able to have children with Sarah. 6, God tells him to circumcise himself at an advanced age of what? 100 years old. Right at 100. The king of Gerar captures Sarah, intends to take her for his wife. Another test, and another challenge to say, this is my sister. God tells him to send Hagar away after having a child with her. And then his son Ishmael becomes estranged from the family, and God tells him to sacrifice his dear son Isaac upon the altar. We will deal with some of these tests, but I want you to look at them not as specifics in the specific way concerning your own life. I doubt seriously Hashem's going to ask you to sacrifice your son or your daughter. Okay? I don't think that you're going to be put in a situation in which you would say your wife is your sister. And if you do, maybe we need counseling. Maybe that would help, right? I'm not sure that you'll ever be faced with this situation of your nephew being captured by a king and have to go fight a battle. But really, we should look at these tests as categories or the types of tests that the Tzaddik must go through, right? So I will attempt in some way to parallel those to categories or common tests that a righteous person in this age or any age would have to go through. And so that we can draw sort of the parallels. And then we're going to wrap it up in this lesson with the message from the Rabbi Nachman of Breslau, who really draws down a wonderful Torah on trust. Because ultimately, the secret to passing the test is our trust and faith in Hashem. That's the key. It's not necessarily having the wit or the wisdom to do it, but the trust that no Hashem is going to carry you through those things. There is something that says in L'chutei Maharan that we should cry out to Hashem and ask Him to help us when we're in situations that we're tested. He wants us to cry out, and He will give you the wisdom and the ability to go through them. But one of the hallmarks of Abraham that we find different from Noah was this. Noah did exactly what God said. I mean, you could say that the flood was the biggest test, okay? Maybe he had one just huge test and that was enough. But it seems that Noah was not tested like Abraham. Abraham was tested on every different level. First, he was tested on a very personal level. Leave your family. That's huge. Leave your family. The separation of one's idealism, social connections, and nurturing comfort of family and friends is huge to leave that. That is a challenge that very few of us can actually do. If I were told to have nothing to do with my family, and I love them dearly and we're very close, that would be painful. Very, very painful. Even though I may not have the same lifestyle as my family, it would still be very painful, and all of you would feel the same. But Abraham was told, the equivalent of what was requested by Abraham would be as if God asked you to leave and move to a remote island where you'll never see your family again. That's pretty big. Not only do you leave your family, but you leave the comfort of your family and society. Meaning what you knew as a comfortable space for you, now you're going to have to be a stranger in a strange land. That's a tough thing. Now, everyone in this room and those who are watching on live stream will know what I'm talking about. When you accepted the mantle of B'nai Noach, you accepted a mantle of becoming a stranger. You recognized at some point in your life that where you were at was not where you should be, and you answered that call. That is the first test of the Tzaddikim. The second test of the Tzaddikim is when you finally get to the place where you think you should be, i.e., I left my idolatry, I've left my past, I've left my old cultural mindset, I've left sort of my materialistic thinking that I normally had, and I've taken on the yoke of Torah. Now you find yourself where you thought Hashem wanted you to be, and it's a dry land. There's no nurturing. There's nothing to sustain you. You feel absolutely lost. How many of you felt when you first came to where you knew, I have to study Torah, I have to know Hashem, I have to embrace one God, and you thought, oh my goodness, this is a lonely place. And not very many people are here, and I'm not sure that this can sustain me. Abraham had that same situation in Canaan. That's why he had to go to Egypt. Or he went to Egypt. He goes to Egypt, and the test was this. Am I going to do everything I can to sustain my life and to make sure I live? And if I trust Hashem, then I will come out of that on the other side in a positive, not in a negative. Because when Abraham went to Egypt, he left Egypt with more finances, more wealth, everything. He even had servants. He had more than what he had when he went to Egypt. So without even going and begging for something, he came out smelling like a rose. What is the key to that? Whenever you find yourself sort of in this place of embracing Torah, embracing Hashem, and you find yourself feeling like it's a wasteland, and you just, I'm not sure that I can sustain myself here. It's lonely. Know that the biggest test for you is going to be the test of your absolute survival. You've got to think about surviving. When I say that, I mean by this. Hashem does not expect you to self-destruct. He doesn't expect you to fall by the wayside and languish. Rabbi Tovia Singer said this to me the other day, and it really hit hard. He said that he had a young man that he was in communication with that was very strong in the ministry, in Christian ministry, and left Christianity, but he didn't stop at Torah. He's now a complete atheist. Right? He's self-destructive. Self-destructive. It's a horrible thing to hear, but that is the possibility. Abraham could have went to Canaan and just vanquished. But he thought about his survival. He thought about the survival of his family, the survival of the people that were with him, because you remember he took all these souls from Ur of Chaldees and from Haran. He brings them there in Canaan. He had to think more than just about himself. He had to think about everybody else. And so what I'm saying is that the second part of the test of the Tzaddikim, or the righteous of the nations, is when you're tested, when you get to a place that you thought that God had promised you and you find it. It's a dry, very difficult journey. Don't fret. Trust Hashem, but think about your survival. You have to survive. Don't do anything insane. Don't do anything that you shouldn't do. How many people have I heard that have just come into Torah and they begin to hear the will of Hashem and they do lach lecha in their life and they go off the deep end and they make it so impossible they can't even live that life, right? They want to try to become a frum Jew. That's not your calling. Your calling is to love Hashem. Your calling is to walk in the Torah as best as you possibly can. At least the Shavah Mitzvot, the 7 mitzvahs of Noah. And then as you begin to do that, take your time. Hashem will guide you to where you need to be. Abraham faces a battle with the 4 kings, the 5 keys. And in this battle, he rescues Lot. And let me just take a side note, because this is very important for us to discuss this, because it's part of our dialogue. Is Abraham battles these kings, wins. He takes probably over 300 of his own troops. Now think about this. You think Abraham is a old man that sits in a tent and welcomes guests. But no, this is a guy who has 300 foot soldiers. Right? This guy, he's got a whole rig. He's up. He's well set. He fights the battle and he comes back. Who does he come back for to give an offering to? Do you remember? Melech Tzaddik. Who is the Melech Tzaddik? Who is the righteous king? Shem. Shem is the grandson, is a descendant of Noah. He's the son of Noah, right? Shem has the academy of Shem, and this is what we learn from Midrash and from the Talmudic sources, that Shem had the academy of Shem there, and Eber, his son, actually took over after Shem died. Lot goes to pay a tithe to Shem. Now, it's been a big mystery to most people, especially Christians, because they have something that says in their book called Hebrews, Book of Hebrews, that about Shem, and it's very confusing. Here, when we can understand that Shem was his teacher, now we understand why all of a sudden, out of nowhere, does he go pay a tithe. Think about this. Nowhere is it mentioned about Melech Tzaddik up until this point. All of a sudden he fights a battle, and he just shows up and pays a tithe. Why does he pay a tithe? Because of the fact that this man is the man who led him in the knowledge of God, and who taught him the Torah of his fathers of his fathers Noah and Adam. So what we have is Shem, who teaches him the Torah, and later on we're going to find out Yaakov goes to the Academy of Shem as well to study when he runs, when he's on the run. So this is very interesting because when he is tested in this battle, he fights the battle. This category would be the category of what do you do with your family members? You follow? What do we do with our family members? What do we do with the ones who don't get it? Was Lot one of those guys that didn't get it? And if Lot wasn't where he wasn't supposed to be, he probably wouldn't have been captured, right? But instead, he got captured. So this is the test. You have to be prepared to react to your family members who get caught up in a world of destruction, being captured by the four kings, being captured by the pagan idolatry that is in the world. And at some level, you have to be very cunning and you have to be very sharp to be able to fight that battle. You don't go into battle if you're not prepared. Okay? So don't get into a battle with someone who has captured your nieces and nephews or sons and daughters if you're not prepared to go to battle. And trust me, when you go into battle, if you're prepared, you will win. But you have to be prepared. How many of you have had a discussion with a family member or someone that was caught up and you realized that was not the right time to talk about it? Right? Because what happens? You come back bloodied. You come back hurt. So the best thing to do is don't go into the battle unless you know that you can win the battle. Then we have the story of let me see something here. I want to make sure I don't get beyond my, So then we have the test of Sarah and Hagar. The promise is given to Abraham that he is going to be the father of many nations. And he's thinking, okay, but I'm not even the father of one son or one daughter. How are we going to do this? He takes it into his own hand. Hagar convinces him this would be the right thing to do, which was pretty customary for the time. If you couldn't have a child, you could take the child, marry a servant of yours, and bear children with the servant. So he decides to do this. The problem is, that's not what Hashem had in mind, did he? He had something else in mind, and that was to give him a son. Abraham decided this would be the best avenue, the best course. Sarah, thinking it would be the best course, they have a child, and his name is Ishmael. So what's this test about? This test is about not getting ahead of Hashem. Don't get ahead of Hashem. When I talk about test, I'm specifically addressing the test to those of the nations who are coming to Torah. But I also want to address it to the secular Jewish person that is watching or listening and hear this and feel the tug of Hashem to return to your Yiddishkeit. Don't get in a hurry. Don't try to do too much, or you're going to foul things up. Don't get ahead of Hashem. Take your time. I quote Rabbi Wolbe of Torch in Houston. He often tells those who are wanting to enter back into Torah life and to be from, he says, try one light switch at a time. Just one light switch. Don't try to do everything. Don't try to become frum overnight. Why? Because we learn even from the Ramchal in the book Path of the Just, we learned that a person who has watchfulness or vigilance without watchfulness is a person who's going to make a big mistake. Like a person whose house is on fire and they run out with the cat and nothing else. Right? It's like you in a hurry will do something emotionally that is not really the most prudent thing to do. And so what do we learn from this about the test? This category of test is the kind of test that is going to be the test of your zeal and watchfulness, a balance between your zerus and zerios, right? It's the fine, delicate balance between the two things. If you can have watchfulness and zeal together, you're not going to get ahead of Hashem. You won't get ahead of Hashem. And let me tell you, every one of us in this room have been guilty of that at one time or another, right? You're ready tomorrow to sell everything you have and to go do what you have to do. But you cannot get ahead of Hashem. Next. God tells Abraham to circumcise himself. You're thinking, the ladies are like, whew, glad we won't pass this test, but I'm sorry, but this is a category you're going to have to go through it. What the category is this? Covenant relationship with Hashem is very personal and can be very painful to make that decision. I'm talking about that one decision. Why is it painful? It's painful because that which you know, the paradigms of your life, your psychological processes, your attitude to things in life, your materialism, everything that is associated with the Yetzer Hara has to be cut off. Everything. You can no longer, when you're in covenant relationship with Hashem, say, well, God understands me and He knows this is just the way I am. He knows I just can't hold my peace. I've got to tell people what I think. Right? Or He knows that, I hold a grudge. He's just going to have to deal with that. I would like to let you know that the cutting away of the flesh of Abraham was a sign of something that Abraham had already done deep in his mind and his spirit. He followed the Torah of Hashem all the way through his journeys. Lech Lecha, the Midrash says that he carried around his own Torah scroll. Now, what do we know about this? He didn't have a physical Torah scroll. What did he have? He carried, as if he had a Torah scroll with him all the time, the knowledge of Hashem and the laws of God passed down from Adam. This is a man, a long time before he cut his flesh, he was already circumcised of the heart, circumcised in the mind. You see, this circumcision, especially the circumcision of the nations, is not a circumcision of the flesh, but it's a circumcision of the neshama, of the nefesh, the soul. It's what you take and you remove from your own desire, and you say, Hashem, this is what is mine, and this is what's covering me. This is my flesh. I am now going to remove it for my relationship with you as a sign for everyone around us. Now, no one is able to see a circumcision of the flesh. But everyone, when I say that, you understand, on a regular basis, I'm talking about day to day. But everyone sees the circumcision of the heart. Everyone can see a circumcision of the mind. When you go to work, when you're with your family members, they can tell. If you're the same old person that you were 15 years ago, you're not circumcised of the heart. If they can tell you have the same old nasty attitudes about life, you hold grudges, you do lashon hara, evil speech, you haven't circumcised your heart. So what is this about? The commitment to follow Hashem in covenant relationship is about removing that which is part of you that is absolutely the most attached and personal, and to remove it is the most painful. That's what a circumcision is. See, you ladies thought you were going to get away from it. We all have to do it. God tells Hagar that she's going to have to send the son away, and Abraham is tested again because he's thinking, this boy I love. He raised Ishmael up from 13 years old. Ishmael was circumcised as a 13-year-old boy. Was very close to him. Loved him. I couldn't imagine being told by my wife that I had to send I can imagine that. When they're bad, I can imagine my wife saying, send them away. Just let them go out in the desert. I don't want to see them anymore. She never said that. But there were times we thought it probably, right? But that had to have been pretty tough to tell this young man that you raised, and I'm sure he had a great relationship with Abraham. Because if Abraham was anything close to what we can imagine him to be, as a man full of chesed, loving kindness toward people outside of his home, can you imagine the way he was as a father? Can you imagine Ishmael following his dad everywhere he goes, whatever he's doing? He watches his dad greet visitors. They come for the meals. He helps his mom gather the stuff together and the servants to cook meals for all these guests. He sees this great hospitality, and now he's going to be pushed out of the desert, and his father's thinking, I am now showing my son Ishmael how not to act. What a horrible thing. Now Ishmael goes out of the camp, and he's estranged by his father. The test is this. Each one of us has something very precious to us in our life that when Hashem asks you to separate yourself from it, you're going to have to do it. I'm not talking about your son or your daughter. I'm talking about something that's precious, very precious. Because oftentimes that very precious thing is what keeps you from fully achieving what God has asked you to do. I don't know what it is. We all have our own personal things that we have to deal with. And then last but not least of the 10 is the sacrifice of Isaac on the altar. I thought long and hard about this situation. And I was trying to figure out, why would Hashem ask Abraham to sacrifice his son? Because there's no such concept anywhere in the Torah to sacrifice a human being. Where do we see human sacrifice? The Moabites, right? We see it in the nations. They do those kind of crazy things. We also understand that Abraham, coming from an idolatrous society, would often see those kinds of things being done in their society. We learn from the Midrash and I think that Ira Michelson covered this one day last week. We learn that the sacrificial system that was instituted in the Mishkan in the wilderness had much to do with weaning the Israelites off of idolatry, right? To get them to focus their adoration and their system of sacrifice to other gods, and instead putting it in under the order and auspices of the Creator of the universe, and do it only by His method, and only for the purpose of korbaning, of drawing near to God. The idolatrous nations would do it to appease the gods. They would do it to bring blessing. But Hashem says you do it to korban, to draw near. Now, what the best way to describe the drawing near is, if I want to get close to somebody and I want to develop my friendship or relationship with them, I use gifts, I use things to draw near to them. That's very simple. This sacrificial system was never intended to appease an angry, vengeful God. Never was. And it wasn't about blood. God never wanted the blood. If anything, He told them to remove the blood before it was put the sacrifice was put on the altar. So why did Abraham ask for Isaac? The final test is, are you willing to do what God says, even though it defies all of your logic? It defies all your logic. God will never ask you to do something that's against His will. Right? So there has to be a purpose behind it. Deep down inside, Abraham is probably thinking, there's something wrong with this. I'm not sure if I heard right, but I'm going to do it. And if I heard wrong, then He's going to stop me. Right? And if I've heard right, then Hashem must know what I need to do. He'll resurrect the boy, whatever, because I know that He said that I'm going to be a father of many nations. My children will be like the sands of the sea. How can that happen if I destroy my only son? And if I destroy my only son, I can imagine all these things going through his mind. But the biggest test is this, is that Hashem is looking to Abraham and saying, this is the final one. If you pass this one, you've got it. And that is this. When you are brought back to the opportunity to fall into your idolatrous ways, what will you say? What will you do? How will you think? How will it challenge you? Here's the analogy to it. Before you came to Torah, before you came to your relationship with Hashem, you would have never thought of certain things being repulsive to you. You come to the knowledge of Torah, and all of a sudden it gets introduced back into your life, and it is absolutely repulsive. You can't even explain why. It's not like you went through some special program to do this. It's just Hashem has transformed your mind, and so the very thought of going back to that particular lifestyle or doing this certain thing that you know is against the Torah, you wouldn't do it. It's repulsive, right? Isaac, sacrificing his son Isaac, in every measure had to test Abraham to the hilt. Think about this. You've asked me to take one son and exile him in the desert. Now you're telling me to take the last one that I have and to sacrifice him. This sounds like idolatry. This is nuts. But is he going to do it? Rabbi Nachman says this: those with deep trust in God are the organs of conception and birth. As it were, everything that is born in this world, all the blessings that flow into it, everything comes about through trust. The way to develop trust is through listening to the stories of the Tzaddikim. There are many people who sleep away their days. They need to be aroused, and the way to arouse them is by showing them the radiance of Torah. But because they are asleep, it could be damaging to expose them to the full light of Torah too suddenly. The Tzaddikims veil the wisdom of the Torah in stories, which have the power to arouse those who are asleep. These people are literally like the dumb. They are totally incapable of uttering a holy single word. But when they are aroused from their sleep, the power of speech is liberated. Then they begin to speak with tremendous force. Holy speech strengthens our trust in God. Those who are barren are able to give birth and attain true awe of heaven. When you trust in Hashem, you look to Him alone for your needs. A vessel is formed with which you can receive the blessing. What you need will be sent to you as and when you require it. There's a story, I'm not sure if you've heard this, but I'll tell it again. Story of two young couples who can't have a child. And they're going to their rabbi on a regular basis, and very righteous tzaddik, to get counseling. They don't know, is there something in our life? Why can't we bear children? And so they show up for their appointment, and both couples have their appointments close to each other, so they see each other for months in the same waiting room. Well, this time one of the couples show up, and the other couple has a baby carriage, and there is a little baby. And they're like, I don't get it. How is it that they have a child now, we don't have a child? And so they went in, they're all frustrated. They said, Rebbe, we don't understand. How is it we're both in the same situation? They have a child and we don't have a child. He said they went out and bought a carriage. You understand? So what Rabbi Nachman is saying is you form a vessel by your trust in Hashem. If you don't, and this trusting Hashem is not about trusting Him for a thing. Do you understand? Most people think, I've got to trust Him for a thing, for some material item. Trusting Hashem is about hollowing out a vessel in which unequivocally you cannot be shaken from your trust of Hashem. Somebody asked me last week this question. I never had it posed to me. They heard about my journey and the difficulties that I'd gone through in the journey. And then this person asked, at any moment during that time, did you want to give up on everything? And I went, what do you mean? Like, give up on my past or Christianity? What were you talking about? No, give up on all, God, everything. And I was like, God forbid, no. I would never, I'd never even crossed my mind to give up on God. It's never even crossed my mind to say, okay, I just not going to do it, I'm going to give up on God. To me, it's impossible. I don't know how one could give up on God. So the idea is this, is that vessel that you hollow out becomes a vessel to receive the blessings of God and the provision of God. You see, this is the deal. People wonder why I don't get provision from Hashem. Why is it that I don't gain wisdom from Him? Why can I not obtain the Torah that is taught? If you don't put your trust in Hashem, you won't have the vessel. If you don't have the vessel, you cannot receive the gift that Hashem has. There are higher and higher levels of trust, of course. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says this reaches up to infinity. The greater a person's wisdom and understanding, the deeper his trust. The more trusting he is, the more generous he will be in giving charity. Why is that? God will provide. That's it. Charity is the gateway to the perfection of the faculty of speech, which is the essence of man's superiority over animals. I had yesterday spoke with a young Muslim man in another country who has left his Islamic beliefs. He's been following us on the NETIV and watching the videos. He's 25 years old. Where do I go? What do I do with my family? I had all these questions. I'm young. I'm not married. How am I going to find a wife that's like me? I mean, all these questions. And at some level, I began to hear the desperation that he had. And for a moment, I wasn't sure how I was going to answer him, because his problems seemed to be so complex that I'm thinking, where do I start with this guy? I mean, I'm not really sure. Where do I start? And Baruch Hashem, I was reminded of the words of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. I was reminded of the words of the great sages of Judaism that says one simple thing. Trust in God with your whole heart. Don't lean to your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. I just typed that, sent it to him, because we're talking back. He's doing text on a phone. And he didn't respond back for a long time. And he goes, wow. Okay. How do I start doing that? How do I start trusting Him? That's a good, simple question. I said, first you start trusting Him by consuming everything that you can to know God. Remember that personal prayer is the secret to connecting to God. So learn how to pray personal prayers to God. Let Him hear your desperations. Don't just ask me your problems. Tell me about your problems, but confess them to Hashem and let Hashem guide you. This is the trust. If we can give this gift to every human being in the world, there wouldn't be a need for a religion. Listen, this world does not need religion. You understand, or needs another religion out there. We need Hashem. We need His Torah. We need to be tested by His Torah and proven by His Torah. Last, besides trusting God, there's a trust of the other side, which is the trust in the old trickster, which is Hasatan. One can trust the dark side more than they trust Hashem. They trust the negative side more than they trust Hashem. They trust the Yetzer Hara more than they trust Hashem. Right? Because what happens as soon as you fall, what do? I knew that was coming. Right? As soon as something negative happens, I knew that was coming. Right? Instead of saying, Baruch Hashem, life is I'm going to achieve greater things. No, it's like, I knew that was coming. Boy, when it rains, it pours. Right? But instead, our attitude should be that I trust Hashem more than I trust any situation in my life. Last, I'd like to read this paragraph. To explain the concept of trust a little bit more fully, and the essence of genuine trust is summed up in the words of the Psalm. Trust in God and do good. One should never let oneself be diverted from Torah study, prayer, or devotion because of worries about not having enough to live off of. A man should continue to serve God in confidence that God will always send him whatever he needs. Not everyone has such absolute trust that they are prepared to separate themselves completely from concerns of this world. But even those engaged in business or work of some kind must make sure to fix regular times of Torah study, to pray at the appropriate times, and to carry out all other obligations to Hashem. They should not allow themselves to be pushed off course by worries, by earning a living. They should trust Hashem to give them their livelihood. When it comes to giving charity and helping others or praying or paying whatever is needed for the various mitzvahs, they should trust God. God will provide them with whatever they need and bless them in merit of their deeds. So what is the key to passing the test? Trust. Trust.
Even if you fake it till you make it.
You fake it till you make it. Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're having a difficult time, feeling joy come back into your life, follow the teachings of Rabbi Nachman that says, fake it till you make it. Well, that's my interpretation. Right? Wake up whistling, singing a song. It won't be long. Within 45 minutes, your soul will follow your song. It really will. Now, promise you, I've been the guy who didn't think about it, wasn't cognizant of it, and realized that I was zapping myself or robbing myself of all kinds of simcha and purity of joy because I didn't do that. And so I worked hard to get up in the morning or get up and whistle and sing, say something good. One of the worst things that I had to deal with is my wife and I would get up, she'd be fixing the coffee, and I'd be walking in, blurry head, and I'm like, so how did you sleep? Right? And she'd say, how'd you sleep? And I'd go, hey, it was terrible. I woke up 3 times. I had to go to the restroom twice. You know, it's like you're going through this litany of all the misery in your sleep, and I'm thinking, what was that? What's that about? Why do I need to do that? Right? So and now I'm trying to say, regardless of what the sleep was like, it was great. I woke up.
Yeah, that's it.
Baruch Hashem, I woke up. And when you get to be over 50, waking up is a good thing, right? So
Keep it simple.
keep it very simple. So in the end, we know that we should welcome tests. And when we don't feel that we are being refined or improved, then we should cry out for Hashem for tests.
No.
Some of us have plenty of tests, right? I have the feeling that most people are tested, they just don't realize it, right? I think if you looked around, you'll realize you're being tested.
But once
So-
you realize it, you act differently.
You know, absolutely. You act oh yeah, absolutely. The thing is if you're absolutely right. If you are cognizant that everything in life is a test by Hashem, you won't react the way you do, like the way you used to. It's the difference between how I drive if I know a police officer is behind me or if he's not.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Oh yeah, why are you pointing at your husband?
Well, because we were coming in the tip,
Right?
and he's always passing in the middle of an intersection. And I said, that's against the law. You
Right.
can't do that. He said, well, I know it, but I had to. And this cop comes up behind him. He goes, oh, there's a police officer. I said, yeah, he probably saw you cut
Right?
in the intersection. So he's, oh, it's 30 here. Slowing down.
So that's the whole case. So the whole idea is if you know life's a test, then we're going to act like, as Rabbi Zalman Whiteley says, you must act as if Hashem's looking over your shoulder all the time.
That's right.
To be honest with you, we really don't trust Him if we don't think that's the case. If you really trust Him, you're careful about every word that comes out of your mouth because you know Hashem's looking over your shoulder. All right? So we learned a big thing. So tonight we discovered this week in Lech Lecha how Abraham changed the world. And I say how Abraham changed the world is by demonstrating to the world that trusting Hashem has huge benefits. Huge benefits. That concludes the class. Any time for question and answers, now would be the time of comments. None? Yes, ma'am.
I was just, my eyes just found this verse.
Okay.
It is in 15:6, speaking of Abraham after God told him to go out and count the stars and whatever.
Right.
And that would be his seed, and he says that of Abram, and he had put all his trust in God.
All of his trust in God. That's beautiful. All of his trust.
And then I was thinking of Adon Olam when you mentioned
Right.
Rabbi Priest. And my this commentary says that Abram was probably the first one to call Hashem by Adon.
Right. I don't know.
Yes, I think it is, yeah.
And that's interesting.
That is.
Because that's how he put all his trust in God, because he was the only one.
Right, see, it wasn't that God was his all. God was everything.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
That's the big difference. It's like,
Correct.
okay, yes, he's personal to you, but it's more than that. There is nothing. There is nothing outside of Hashem. Nothing would exist outside of Hashem. That's beautiful. Good point. Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about the sacrifices and that he instructed them and why he did. I won't go into all that again. But when you were talking about it, and then talking about in the same kind of thing as Abraham sacrificing or willing to sacrifice Isaac, I was thinking two things. First of all, that when he was doing this and preparing and going to sacrifice Isaac, he had already sacrificed him in himself already. I mean, he had already.
Oh, yeah, I got what you're saying. Already he recognized that Isaac was Hashem's, not his.
Correct.
That's beautiful. That's good.
And that's just
Very
Trust.
good point. That is trust.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
trust.
It's before, and
But it
Abraham
was his whole
was always
promise
before.
from God, too, that he was sacrificing.
Right,
Everything that God had promised him, he was actually
right.
going to put it on the altar. He was in the
Right.
process of, and that was also encouraging to me because we don't have to go to such great lengths of actually sometimes doing the dastardly deed of thinking that we're going to have to cut off everything.
Right.
That many times we don't have to go that far,
Right.
although we're willing to. We make
Right.
that decision.
Right.
We're going to do whatever it takes.
Right.
It just seemed to me bigger this time than ever.
No,
before.
absolutely. You know, it really hit me this time around, this parsha, to recognize that Abraham didn't go down and meditate all the things that he trusts God in. Like, okay, if you ask me to give up my son, I'll do it. If you ask me to, he didn't do all that. It was the fact that deep down inside, that's who he was. That's who he had become. And realize he hadn't had, to our knowledge, any great events, angelic event or epiphany or whatever, to make this decision. He made it purely on the knowledge that was shared to him by Shem. Purely on the knowledge that there is one God and there is a law, Torah, that goes back to Adam. And he said, this is my God. Period. That was it. No ifs, ands, or buts. And whenever God spoke to him, whatever that was in his life, he did it. He just didn't even think twice about it. And so at the core, he would have, even if God says, I'm going to make you the father of many nations and you'll never have a son, I think Abraham would have went, okay, it's going to happen. It's got to happen. I don't know how he's going to do it. But he's going to do it because deep down in the core, he had no room for his own.
Nothing was more important than Hashem.
Nothing.
He had complete certainty.
Yes.
And that's why he went through it all with Isaac, because he knew that it's going to go right to the very point, but it's going to be stopped.
It's going to be stopped. Right.
His why was big.
Oh, absolutely.
When he had finally reached to a point where his why was everything.
It was just knowing that he didn't have to fill in that space where God is. And I think where most of us are at, we're trying to fill our God space with our own stuff. And if we realize, no, God's not that small that he needs your help. Right? So we just need to pull out of that space and let God be in that space.
sometimes we just need to be reminded.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We need to be reminded. Absolutely. And if how many people have you known that have had a disastrous situation where they lost a child and lose their faith? How about that? Completely. Why do they lose their faith?
They never had it to begin with.
They didn't have trust.
Right.
Didn't have trust. Because people can have faith, emotional elevation, and connection with Hashem. But if you don't trust God, what's going to happen is when you come down to that, it's like,
That's hard.
It's-
When it comes to a kid,
It's hard.
I
I
work
know.
hospice. Trust me when I say that is a hard thing. When
It's
you
a hard
see
thing.
your kid suffering and
It is, I can't, no, I absolutely, absolutely. I can't imagine, I mean, we've gone through our stuff with our daughter, but I've not seen my daughter dying on a bed with cancer. Or a son. That's gotta be
a
tough.
very good friend of mine lost her 10-year-old daughter to
That's all right.
leukemia.
Wow.
It's still real fresh.
No, absolutely.
But she completely walked away from God.
Really.
And she asks me all the time, she'll message me through Facebook and ask me, like, how do you keep going? Like, how do you keep so much faith in God? Because everything that happened to my Kendall bug, I lost it.
Right. And see, no, I completely understand that. And it happens to a lot of people.
Sorry, it's just,
No,
it was
no.
a really good friend of mine.
No, absolutely. I mean, I sense the emotion in that.
Mhm.
The issue is this, is one can have a lot of faith in God. That is, you believe God. But if you don't trust, do you understand the difference between trust and faith? Faith, emunah, is trust and faith together. Real faith is trust and faith together. It's the difference between having zeal and watchfulness. You can't have one without the other. You can't have true faith, complete faith, without complete trust. And I'm going to tell you, that is the deal. Whenever we see somebody who lose a child and they walk away from Hashem and they become angry, at some point they have, no matter how they've been, no matter how much faith they've demonstrated, it comes down to, I don't trust God that He knows what He's doing, or knows what was the big why?
When your wine gets big enough.
Yeah, you have to trust God, and so I guess maybe that's a cop out for the religious,
But she's
is to
talking
say, well, I
about
trust
Hashem.
God, huh?
She's talking about God. And she's stirred up. She might be angry as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a process that sometimes we get stirred up, we get angry, and it maybe we can't do it all pretty like Abraham, but we can do
Absolutely.
it. And God
Absolutely,
doesn't let go of it.
absolutely,
He is always there.
I
And
agree.
she knows that.
I
This
agree.
lady knows that. She talks about it.
right. That's why I say that, just encourage her to say, regardless of how you feel about Hashem or God, God still loves you and He believes in you.
Absolutely.
You know, you might not trust Him right now. You just don't understand and fathom why this could happen to your daughter. But trust me when I tell you that God believes in you and He'll always be by your side. She cannot walk away from God.
You know, it was different with my brother-in-law because I know that he started doing Shabbat with us on Fridays about a year, not even a year before Michael passed.
Mm-hmm.
And he has said several times that if it wasn't for Torah,
Right.
that he would not know where he would be right now.
Yeah, some of you guys may not have been here last year, but Joe, who usually sits on the back row, his son was killed in a very tragic car accident. And like he said, if it wasn't for Torah, I would have fallen apart and not had. Why? Because Torah is what nurtures your trust for Hashem. Helps you to nurture.
There's a difference between knowing God and knowing of God.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And trust comes with knowing God. When you know of God, you haven't really experienced it, and the trust is not there.
That's true.
And when you know God, you know how.
But when you wrangle before God with the difficulties, when you wrangle with God, even if you're upset with Him, if you're, like this lady, I mean, she's actually wrangling.
No, actually,
with
to be honest with you, that is her relationship with God right
Yes.
now. She might, in her mind, think that she's rejected God or walked away from Him because of her questions. You've got to help her know the whole idea of our relationship with God is saying why, is saying how can you do this, is asking questions. I mean, the idea is, like we have in relationships, like be mad at me, love me, but don't just ignore me or be indifferent. What is the opposite of love? Indifference.
Correct.
She's not indifferent. Okay, trust me, she's not indifferent. You can really speak some encouraging words to her.
It's hard.
I know.
And I think she reaches out to me because she sees a lot of my posts and
Right.
she knows, I know everything she went through. I was there through it with her, and it just, so I feel like I'm a comfort to her, but
Absolutely.
it's still like, I guess seeing that and being a parent, and most of us are parents,
Oh, no, I
I
can't.
don't know what I would do if that was that situation, because I've seen it more than just her. That was more personal.
God forbid you would
So,
ever, or anybody in this room ever have to
No.
deal with that. And that would be a horrible thing. At the same time, where is our trust? Well, I don't know, that's tough.
It's a tough.
We can't dictate it. We can't, unless it's tested. But this is the deal. When we talk about the development of the Zadik, or Zadikim, this is the test for the Zadikim. Most people will never go through this level of test, ever. Hashem knows they couldn't make it. So if you have gone through this test, you know that these tests are for those He's making righteous. And there's a reason why your soul has to go through this level of refinement in this world. Because the world to come is so important that Hashem is to get you to this place, because the world to come for you is going to be at a great reward level. That if you've been tested like that, you have been tested like Abraham Avinu.
Yes.
And if you pass the test, even if you don't pass the test, the idea is, what are you going to do with the test? And I'm not sure so much is that what's important is whether you pass the test or fail the test, is that you go through the test trusting Hashem. You go through the test on the other end of it, you say, Hashem, okay, I made a blunder of this one, but now I've learned my lesson. I know now what you're trying to do with me. That's the difference. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
This is, I don't remember where I read it, but there was a really righteous couple, a Jewish couple, and they had, children, and the little boy suffered a terrible death. And then 3 months later, her husband, who was also a very righteous man, died. And of course, she was very distraught, didn't understand why these things happened, because they were really serving God.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a dream, and in her dream, her husband came to her and told her, well, you don't know this, but our son had this soul that was very righteous,
Right.
and that he had to do this one thing. But it was all about the things that happened. They had to go through these things, and then that was all they had to do.
Right.
To be taken out, and
Right.
they had, and so all they. I don't know. I'm not explaining.
No. I think we all understand exactly what you're saying, because
Exactly.
I think, my wife and I have these conversations a lot, because, people that we deal with in tragic situations, and, we'll both sit there initially and go, what do you suppose? I mean, why does this have to happen to this person? Why does this have to happen? And then ultimately, especially when it comes to death of a person, is we know if we trust Hashem, then we trust that He knows what He's doing with His creation. It's two great sages are walking down the street. One steps in a puddle of water, and actually they both walk in a puddle of water. They're both very irritated. But one starts raging. This puddle of water, it's made my foot messy and dirty. And the other guy started blessing Hashem. It's like, why are you, I don't understand. This is muddy water. How can you bless Hashem for it? He said, how can I speak against His creation? I mean, at that level of a Zadik, he wasn't even going to speak against a puddle of water, because it was Hashem's creation. Trusting Hashem at that level, that's big. So ultimately it comes down to saying, if I can't trust Him to be everything and all, He's self-sufficient in everything, if I start removing pieces of that level of trust, then I'm not sure that we can have any faith at all in God if we cannot trust Him with everything and to be everything. Either He is everything and knows everything and has everything for our better interest, or He's not God. We don't have a God if that's the case. So if He is creator of the universe and He's made a decision, I love the thing that someone told me, said that someone told him he was going to go to hell because he was decided to embrace being a B'nai Noach. The person said, if that's what Hashem decides to do, Baruch Hashem, then I will bless him all the way to hell. Do you see the level of trust?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you trust Hashem to that level, whatever He's going to do, He's going to do. You just, okay. You do it. And it takes time. Young people don't develop that level of trust without testing. But you trust your parents. Do you trust your mom? You trust your mom to take care of you? Of course.
I'm glad he has to think about it.
Yeah, I know. I was worried that.
I thought he was gonna think, no.
Yeah, I was. And if he said that, I was going to like take him in the back
Probably
room.
thinking, is this a trick question?
Yeah.
Like,
No, actually, he just woke up. It's probably. If you trust your parents.
Even if we don't pass the test of trust that time, and we wrangle through
It doesn't
and we
matter. It
see
doesn't matter. You're right.
And we see in the past that we really screwed up and we messed it up,
Right.
and we didn't do it right, we can have teshuva in that.
Absolutely.
And reestablish everything. It's not a done deal.
Right. See, the whole idea. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's never done deal, and that's why I'm glad you mentioned it. When we talk about test, why do we have the test? The test isn't about pass or fail.
Right.
The test is about the test. It makes us better. That's what it's for. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
One thing, and I wrote down in my notes today, and I forgot where I got it from.
That's all right.
I need to start writing down.
Yeah, source your material, right?
I think it was from Hirsch, but I'm
Okay.
not sure. When God first called Abram, his name was Abram, right? And he didn't say, he told him to like go for yourself. It's like isolate yourself.
Mhm.
And he didn't say, I will make you a great nation and you will be a blessing.
Mhm.
That's what everybody says he says.
Right.
But he didn't. He said, I wish to make you a great nation and you will become a blessing.
That's very good.
So we're all
the journey.
That's very good.
becoming.
Right.
We're becoming. God wishes.
Right. That is
we
his
can
desire for
become.
us. Right. That's his desire. So this is the question. When did Abraham start becoming?
When he took the first step out of his land.
The first step was trust. The first step of trust in his life is when he started becoming. That's beautiful. Thank you for bringing that down. That's beautiful.
One small step for man and one giant leap for mankind.
Yeah, there you go.
I did read that on
Your
Rabbi
source?
Jacobson.
Yeah, so yeah, Rabbi Jacobson. But the deal is, now we can understand this concept. How did Abraham change the world? You realize 3 major religions all go back to Abraham.
Because he took the one step.
He took the one step. Because of the pure trust in Hashem that he had, he changed the world. He gave us all a paradigm that I can trust the creator of the universe. And this is what's beautiful. You don't have to have religion to do that.
Right.
You trust Hashem anyway. That's what's going to revolutionize the world, my friend, is when the world realizes the creator of the universe has set up a plan for every human being to have an intimate, trusting relationship with him, with great emunah, great faith, without ever having to have a religion. That's cool.